Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now in our 27th episode of 2023. That means that we are officially starting the second half of the year, which this year has gone by incredibly quickly. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast, and our gold sponsor, Gray Bar. Hope everybody had a wonderful July 4th holiday. And after a huge week in DC last week, with the president's announcement on the NTIA allocation of the $42.45 billion in BEAD funding to each state and territory, this week has been a bit quiet with the holiday and Congress in recess. That said, on June 28th, NTIA released the final guidance for the BEAD program's state challenge process. And on Monday, July 3rd, the FCC always works through the holidays, FCC issued a notice informing ISPs that they're required to submit their January to June 30th, 2023 data for the broadband data collection by September 1st. So this data will be used to create the next iteration of the national broadband maps that'll be released later this year. Coming up quickly is Fiber Connect 2023 in Orlando on August 20 to 23. This will be the biggest and best broadband event in the world this year with over 4,000 attendees and an amazing program. This event sells out every year, and I anticipate it's going to sell out even faster this year. So don't wait to register and definitely get your hotel booked at the Gaylord ASAP. Our next and final regional Fiber Connect workshop will be in Minneapolis on October 24th. So registration is now open. That brings us to our today's Fiber for Breakfast session with Dr. Nick Maynard, the co-founder and CEO of US Ignite, who's going to discuss once an underserved community gets a fiber network, what can they do with it? Before I formally introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce Trish Ehlers from our team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thanks, Gary, and good morning to everyone who's joined us today. Before I go over a few logistical items, I'd like to once again thank the platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco, and our gold sponsor, Gray Bar. Now, if everyone would just keep in mind that you're in listen mode only. To ask a question, you can type it into the question box located within your control panel on the right side of your screen on your computer. We'll host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's webinar. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. You can find the recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. At the conclusion of the presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a very brief feedback survey. If you take a minute to do that, we'd really appreciate your input. I'll pass it back to Gary now to formally introduce our panelists and get us started. Gary?
Thanks, Trish, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber Breakfast, we heard from Seamus Dowdall of NACO, who discussed how counties are mobilizing for high-speed internet connectivity. We're in an exciting time where every American is going to be connected with fiber by 2030. So today on Fiber Breakfast, we have the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Nick Maynard, the co-founder and CEO of US Ignite, who's going to discuss once an underserved community gets a fiber network, what can they do with it? So Nick Maynard is the co-founder and CEO of US Ignite, driving the smart community movement and public-private partnerships for community development. As COO, he established US Ignite's Smart Community and Smart Bases program. Previously, as program director at the National Science Foundation, he launched the nationwide Advanced Wireless Research Initiative. And as assistant director at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, Nick managed a federal IT R&D portfolio, initiating over $1 billion in programs, including the president's Connect Home initiative. And with a telecom industry background, he has advised global carriers and vendors on cutting-edge networks. Maynard holds a BA and MA from the University of Chicago, Trish likes that, and a public policy PhD from that other school at the other end of 15501. I won't mention its name, but welcome, Nick. And we're glad to have you here. So please hold your questions as we go, and we'll work them into Q&A at the end. So let's get started.
Yeah, this is great. Well, thank you so much for the time this morning, Gary. Really appreciate everyone else's time this morning. We thought we would just spend some time giving folks some background on US Ignite, the important work that we're doing every day, the history that we've, the important programs and initiatives that we pulled together over the last 10 years, and the exciting work that we have upcoming this year and beyond, supporting not only the BEAT program at NTA, like you mentioned, but also new programs at National Science Foundation, Defense Department, Department of Homeland Security, and Energy, and others. So next slide, please. So Gary, as you mentioned, 25 years in industry and the White House. We spent a lot of time 12 years ago now working on BTOP and BIB, fighting. There was a team of us trying to include, $7 billion, which sounded like a lot at the time, of the Recovery Act back in 2009. So there was a group of us pushing, driving, saying, look, we need to provide some funding for these underserved communities around the country, really identifying some of the important ways that those funds can support those communities. Also work with Defense Department, State of New York, wide range of industry partners on a next-gen photonics foundry in upstate, which was launched 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, and just got extension in its funding. And then, as you mentioned, we worked on the Connect Home program, which really helps identify and address some of the homework gap challenges for families, kids in public housing across the country. So when we launched that program, there were probably 10 or 20 communities participating. And today there's over 100 of them providing training, support, access, broadband service to those families within those public housing, within the PHA communities. Next slide, please. So US Ignite is a nonprofit. Like I said, we were launched out of the White House over 10 years ago now. Our mission is really to help support underserved communities, helping them with their not just broadband challenges, but also economic development or startup and research commercialization challenges. How do you get a good idea out of a laboratory or somebody's garage and into the real world, and it really accelerate the development and deployment of these technologies, whether it's right on top of fiber or next-gen wireless, or combination of both of those technologies. Next slide. So when we launched 10 years ago, we had about 15 communities where we're providing that technical assistance, working with them every day, providing them a wide range of support. That has grown to about 50 communities around the country, in Adelaide, Australia, Puerto Rico, as well as Canada. And then we've got about 7 smart city and networking test beds that we manage for National Science Foundation and the Department of Defense. Next slide. So this is a National Science Foundation Platform for Advanced Wireless Research program. So this is a $100 million initiative. Again, getting good ideas out of the lab into a real world environment. So we've got urban environments, rural environments. We've got different 5G technologies that we're evaluating, like millimeter wave or drone technologies, or rural broadband and precision agriculture out in Ames, Iowa. Each one focuses on a different technology area, use case area for 5G and beyond. Next slide. And so a more recent effort to power was launched about 4 years ago. 2 years ago, we had Project Overcome, similar effort, but again, the smaller amounts of money, but it's $300,000 going to each community. They identified fiber and wireless use cases, new business models. They tested and evaluated them. Some of them, like Cleveland, were able to bring on $20 million in follow-on funding. This was a great way of identifying not just the technologies, but also new ways of deploying these technologies, making them sustainable over the long term. So we put together a lot of great, a community of practice across these 7 cities, but then also putting together best practice playbooks and other materials for these communities, other communities around the country, to help them as they're putting together their plans for BEAD funding, other funding that's coming from state and local governments as well. Next slide. So in addition to the broadband support, we've also got a wide range of startup and small business support. So a lot of these startups and small businesses are working on leveraging these broadband or wireless or IoT networks within their communities. We're providing them with research test beds, providing mentoring, helping them apply for federal funding or apply to startup accelerators. And US Ignite just received $2 million from the Department of Commerce. This is Economic Development Administration providing us with support for training startups and small businesses here in the DC area where we're located. Next slide. Great. So one of the things that we've done with another state of New York effort is putting together a broadband map. This combines a wide range of industry, federal data, demographic data. What we're looking to do is identify those areas that need the most support, but then also which areas are going to have the most economic impact. So as this broadband gets deployed within the state of New York, which ones, as that fiber is deployed or other networks are deployed, what kind of economic impact can they expect within those communities? And so this is a funding that we've received from Knight Foundation. And we're looking to expand this into a national tour right now. We've been doing a wide range of calls and Zoom calls and other meetings with state broadband offices, getting their feedback and suggestions on how do we make this really valuable and useful for the state broadband office, but then also the counties and local and other stakeholders that are coming together for those state level strategies. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we've got 3 DoD projects. So the Defense Department supports work that we're doing around next-gen networking, whether it's a combination of fiber and 5G and deployments, IoT network deployments. We've done autonomous vehicle and drone and other deployments within Fort Carson out in Colorado, Marine Corps Air Station Miramar out in San Diego. So this is home of the first Top Gun movie. And then we've got Fort Moore down in Georgia. This slide shows a little bit about the dashboard that we set up there. So this one is similar approach, similar thinking to what we did with State of New York, but using more real-time data, more sensor data from Colorado Springs, which is right next door to Fort Carson, as well as sensors that we've deployed on the base. So combining weather data, traffic data, other real-time data to put together a dashboard, providing the installation, the neighboring community with a decision tool for do they close the installation down when there's a snowstorm or hailstorm or other inclement weather. So right now they're literally just calling each other by phone at 4 in the morning, saying, look out the window. Is it snowing where you are? And of course, service members, their families, as they come into the base, there's tens of thousands of them every morning. As they're coming into that installation, they're coming in from all over the region. So what we're trying to do is provide them with a more reliable approach, a more flexible approach to give them better information as they're making that decision early in the morning. Next slide. So like I mentioned, we've got a wide range of other programs. Just wanted to sort of hit the highlights this morning. Please reach out to us if your community is interested in talking with us about broadband networks, smart city pilots, supporting the local small businesses, or real-time data dashboard. Gary, turn it back over to you.
All right, so thanks, Nick. So first of all, let's start with smart city. Like
Sure.
when I go and look at a smart city, I see some smart trash cans, some smart light poles. I'm underwhelmed. Um, what
Sure.
So what am I missing? What define what are the innovations in a smart city?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, every community is a little bit different in how they're deploying it. Each community that we work with, you know, they aren't doing, they might be doing smart trash cans, but a lot of them might also be doing public safety or energy usage, right? How do we drive energy consumption down in our municipal buildings? There's also a lot of smart transportation, like if they have traffic or inclement weather challenges, like we were talking about at the Fort Carson example. So I think there's a within the U.S. there's a range of communities, call it the 5 or 10 largest, where they've got a lot of sensors deployed. They've got a tremendous amount of smart city projects underway. And it's just taken time, I would say, over the last couple of 2 or 3 years, where smaller communities, rural communities, even regions or mid-sized communities that might be, 200,000, 300,000, are starting to take some of these technologies and apply them to um, their own challenges. And so, what US Ignite does is we aren't trying to pitch the community. And we're a nonprofit. We're not trying to sell them a particular solution. We're trying to say to them, well, what is your top priority that you're trying to deal with right now? I appreciate that you've got a long list. There might be 5 or 10 things that you're trying to wrestle with, but let's pick 1 or 2. Let's find some cities that have done this in the past. Let's adapt that to your own context, and then let's begin to put together that strategy and deploy it, evaluate it. So we spend a lot of time pulling together best practices, connecting cities with other cities that have gone through that in the past. And so I think we're seeing a lot more of those mid-sized communities today beginning to adapt and use these smart city technologies. I think too that they've spent millions of dollars on fiber or other networks, and that smart city use cases are a great way of demonstrating to the mayor or the city council or other stakeholders, residents, small businesses. This is how that fiber network or that wireless network or the combination of the two can really support the needs of the community and some understandable use cases.
So one of the questions that came in from our audience is, with the requirements around federal funding being, you have to be an existing ISP for at least 3 years, how do you recommend these communities overcome that obstacle?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think every program is a little bit different. Some of them have high match requirements. Others have fewer match requirements. Some of them have required the city or county or some other municipality to be the prime. Others provide a lot more flexibility. I think what we've seen, so like for Department of Transportation, they've got a smart transportation program. It's SMRT. It's actually an acronym. Like the acronym will come to me probably mostly hang up, but it's a program that we spent a lot of time outreach with the Department of Transportation and the Hill and the White House and others saying, look, you've got an infrastructure package. Can we carve out a few dollars of this $1 trillion initiative to say, okay, well, we're going to help these underserved communities test and evaluate some of these smart city technologies within their community. So there's a lot of flexibility on who can apply. You only need to put in 7 pages for the application, and there's $100 million available every year. So if you don't get it this year, you can always revise, resubmit that second year. I think that there's more flexibility in terms of, they were asking about ISP requirements. There's more flexibility as well for the EDA. They've got billions of dollars flowing through that agency as well. You can spend money around broadband deployment. There's a lot more flexibility on who can be within the partnership for those programs. There's also National Science Foundation, a lot of people don't think about them because they tend to focus on traditionally they've provided funding to university professors, right? Providing them with those research dollars. They've got a new directorate now called Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships, TIP for short. And they've got programs like Convergence Accelerator or other these regional innovation programs, regional innovation engines program, which also has a lot of flexibility on who can be the prime, how the money gets used, sort of doing combinations of infrastructure with technical assistance and other use cases within those communities. So there's a lot of new programs out there. They're 10 times bigger than what we worked on in the Obama administration, 10 years ago. And I think it's just finding the right opportunity, identifying the right priority, and then getting those partners together to apply for those opportunities as they come through.
Great. So here's another question from audience. It's a long one, but I think it's a pretty good one. It's
Sure.
Remote working is one aspect of digital transformation that has been left to work from home and modest telework co-working offices. Are there any initiatives that focus on developing regional secure networks of high technology hubs designed for distributed workers, but also examine the opportunities to integrate distance learning classrooms and remote healthcare facilities? While ProTech has received a great deal of attention, little's been done with the new architectural designs to integrate immersive collaboration and unified technology across multi-location offices.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a number of our communities have done things like incentivized programs for trying to get startups and small businesses to move back to the communities, providing them, discounted space or free broadband, or other some of our communities also will do remote worker. They'll give them 8 or 10 or 15K a year to try and incentivize them to sort of move back home and work remotely. I haven't heard them do as much on the secure communication piece. I think that's a terrific aspect, especially if you're trying to do, whether it's work with the DoD or other federal agencies out there or other industry partners. And so I think that's certainly something that more communities need to be addressing, that cybersecurity aspect to their to that deployment. It's not something that I have a ready example of something that's done it, but it's certainly something that is great feedback and something that we'll take back to the team.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we've noticed post-pandemic is we used to have this enterprise network, and then we had, the residential network, and now it's all one network, right? Because if people are working from home, they basically are extended the enterprise network to their homes. And so, that kind of security, even as we start moving into quantum networks where you can get highly secure communications, we're starting to see that, like Chattanooga and other areas.
Right.
So what is the profile?
Yeah, one of our...
Every community is going to have fiber by the end of, by 2030. And so as we're rolling out all this money to bring up, what is the profile that you guys look for? How does a community get your attention, and how do they join one of your programs?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Gary. I think a lot of times we are looking at mid-sized communities. Some of them are, and we have large communities like San Diego and DC and cities that have millions of people in them. We've got a lot of them that are sort of mid-sized, that might be 2, 3, 500,000 people, and then we do have some smaller communities as well, like Red Wing, Minnesota, where they're those tend to be more regional approaches where we're bringing in multiple communities together to collaborate, work together. So like Red Wing, Minnesota just got a grant from EDA for a startup accelerator to help support, encourage more folks to move back to Red Wing or the neighboring communities. And so we spent a lot of time working with them on, providing them technical assistance, helping them identify those programs to apply to, and then there's each one of these programs is sort of a multi-year effort, if you will, of getting the funding, deploying it, and really setting it up. So, US Ignite, while we do have an annual event every year, which is important, it's great to see everyone, in 3 dimensions. And we try and, it's exciting to see the folks cut their ribbon and have the press release. But for us, the focus is really on, working with them day in, day out to actually execute that strategy, helping them find that university or industry or startup partner so that community can really be successful and sustain that strategy over the long term. There's, like you were saying, I think smart city pilots kind of got a bad name, right? Because some CTO within the community found 100K here or 200K there, and they did a smart trash can pilot, and then the administration changes over and it just kind of dies on the vine. And so we're trying to avoid that and say, okay, well, let's start small, but build that out over the months and years to really benefit these communities and make those programs sustainable.
Now, are you funded out of the administration?
So we have, I would say, probably about 80% or 75% of our funding is our contracts with the Defense Department, National Science Foundation, EDA, and others. We have corporate and foundation partners as well. And then individual communities also provide us support as we're pulling these, strategies together and implementing them within the community. So, we have a wide range. No one agency or foundation or community or company represents more than 10 or 20% of our revenue. We try and make sure that, going back to that 5G pilot or testbed program, 30 industry partners working with us. No one company can really dominate that program and push it in one direction. We want to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, and it's really going in a impactful direction over the long term.
Okay, so you don't get disrupted by administration changes. You guys are pretty somewhat independent of that.
That's right. And so I would say that the 5G, smart city, certainly fiber broadband, those are all bipartisan issues. We've never had challenges of going onto the Hill or into an agency and folks saying, that sounds like a terrible idea. They might have feedback or suggestions on an individual program or funding levels, things like that. But it's a very easy sales job, if you will, of trying to explain the impact that these technologies, these programs can have on their communities.
Well, Nick, given all the money and all the broadband networks that are going up now as fast as possible, I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for you to really show these communities how they can leverage this bandwidth to really drive economic development and innovation. So appreciate what you and your team are doing at US Ignite. And so thank you guys for that. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today and look forward to getting back together next Wednesday for Fiber Breakfast. We're going to be speaking with my good friend, Junie Kunstler, the Chief Research Analyst at Omnia Infotech, on the North American pond equipment and vendor market, supporting growth, upgrades, diversity, and sustainability. Julie always has the greatest and latest numbers, so please join me and we'll see what she has to say about where our market's headed. Thanks, everyone. Glad everybody had a great 4th of July and look forward to getting back to work. So see you guys soon.
Thanks so much, Gary.